Baruch Hashem. Today's daf yomi is Chullin Chaf Hey, but we're going to start the Mishnah on the bottom of Chaf Daled Amud Beis. The last two dapim of this perek are really just showing us Mishnayos that are contrasting different elements. Really have nothing to do with Chullin, but because we compared Shlita to Malika, we got into this comparisons. So we have comparisons. So the Mishnah tells us Torah b'kli cheres tamei b'kol hakelim. The kli cheres is a clay utensil. All the other utensils are metal or wood. So whatever is tahor by a clay utensil, will be tamei by other utensils. But tahor b'kol hakelim, whatever is tahor by all the other utensils, is tamei b'kli cheres. Is going to be tamei by a clay utensil. So what is this referring to? Tana Rabbanan, avir kli cheres, the airspace of a clay utensil is tamei, meaning to say, now let's say you have a dead sheretz that goes, this is a clay utensil, this clay cup. So let's say you have a dead sheretz that goes into it, then but doesn't touch it, the utensil will become tamei. Vigavo, but if the dead sheretz touches the outside of the utensil, it's tahor. Avir kol hakelim, but if it would be a different type of utensil, let's say it be a metal utensil and the sheretz just goes into the airspace, then it's tahor, v'gavan, but it touches the outside of it, it's tamei. Nimtza tar b'kli cheres, tamei b'kol hakelim, tar b'kol hakelim, tamei kli cheres. So so we see it's the opposite. Whatever is tahor by the cheres is tamei by the metal, and whatever is the tamei by the metal is tahor by the cheres. Tamei. So minani mili. How do we know this halacha? How do we know these halachos? The Gemara says the Tana Rabbanan tocho. Meaning to say, it says in the pasuk, it says "Daber ben are only more ishmi zarcho dor." No, that's not the pasuk. The pasuk is the next pasuk here. The whole klicharas asher yipol mahem el tocho kol asher betocho yitmav oso tishboro. So this is the idea. It says tocho in that pasuk twice. Any klicharas which something will fall into it, whatever is in it will be tamei. So we see from here, avop tocho, what's in it is tamei. So the klicharis is tamei even though it doesn't touch it. How do you know it even though it doesn't touch it? Maybe it's only if it touches it will it become tamei. So Rabbi Yonasan ben Abtulmos Omer Nemar Tocho tamei, v'Nemar Tocho li tamei. It says Tocho to make something else tamei, and it says Tocho to become tamei. So ma Tocho amor tamei, just like the tocho, which is to make something else tamei, afal pishul nagav. If something is in the klicharis, it becomes tamei, even though the klicharis does not touch it. Ab tocho amur li tamei, also tocho, that the klicharis becomes tamei, afal pishul nagav, even though it didn't touch it. So the Gemara says, yeah, v'hasaminon. How do we know the klicharis can make something tamei, li tamei? How do we know it can make something tamei, even though it didn't touch it? So how do we know that? The Hasaminon, Rabbi Yonasan, HaTorah He'ida al Klichares. The Torah tells us about Klichares, Vafilu Malei Chardal, on top of Chafei Amud Aleph, even if it's full of mustard seeds. Meaning to say, if you have a lot of mustard seeds in one utensil, in a clay utensil, all the seeds are not touching the wall, and if the Klichares is Tamei, then all the seeds are going to be Tamei, even though the middle seeds are clearly not touching the rest of the utensil. So therefore we see that whatever is in it can become tamei, and therefore we can make a gzera shava and say the klicharis itself can become tamei if something is in the middle of it. Now Rashi tells us, how do we know that there are other ways in which the seeds could possibly become tamei? How do we know that those don't apply? So Rashi goes through the different theories of why those don't apply. It's an important Rashi with respect to the laws of Tumah. He says, don't say that one seed is mitame the other. Don't say that, because each seed is not the size of an egg. So food can only be mitame other food if it's the size of an egg. And furthermore, food in general cannot make other food tamei. That's a second reason. And third, even if you want to say that the first food item is imkein zeh sheni v'zeh shlishi, now shlishi lo yaseh revi l'tamei asem tzayim, that you can't have a fourth degree of tumah to become the middle one's tamei, so it would stop. Okay, so now the Gemara says, "Amrei Rav Ada bar Ava Rava." The kli cheres. Why don't we say that a clay utensil is mitamei migabo? It should become tamei by just touching the outside of it. Mikal v'chomer, from a kal v'chomer. Why don't we say just like all other utensils that don't become tamei from the aerospace, that if you touch the outside of them, they become tamei. Which does become tamei from the aerospace. For sure it should become tamei if you touch the outside of it. Amar Kra, based upon the fact that the pasuk says that we know that if there's a dead body in a tent, then everything in the tent becomes tamei. That's called tumas. Anybody know what that's called? What type of tumah is that? Tumas meis, and it's called tumas ohel. Anything that's in the tent becomes tamei. But in this case, if there's a clay utensil that doesn't have a cover on it, then that clay utensil becomes tamei. Ezu klisha tumaso kodemes lepislo. Which is there a utensil where the tumah comes prior to the opening? Which is the utensil where the tumah comes prior to the opening? So we're going to say, this is the kli cheres, because it says in other cases el tocho, meaning say it contracts tumah from the airspace. So therefore, we see from here. Hold on. So we see from here that only when there is no cover on it, that's when the clay utensil becomes tamei. So, but if there would be a cover on it, then the clay utensil will be tahor, and it cannot become tamei from the outside. Mara says, you call a kelim mitama me'avira mikal v'chomer. Why don't we say in general that all other utensils can become tamei from their airspace, from a kal v'chomer? What's the kal v'chomer? Ma kli cheres mitama megabal kli cheres, which does not become tamei from touching it. Mitama me'aviro, it does become tamei from the airspace. Kol a kelim shemitama megavan. All other utensils that do become tamei from touching it. Eno din shemitama me'aviram. For sure, they should become tamei from their airspace. Amar Kra tocho. So it says in the pasuk tocho, which means tocho shel zeh v'lo tocho shel acher. Only the klicheres becomes tamei from the airspace above it, but not another utensil. Mar says, but wait, v'hani tocho hadarshinu. Didn't we just expound tocho to teach us that it doesn't become tamei from the touching, it only becomes tamei from the airspace? And now we're saying that it's to exclude the other utensils from becoming tamei from the airspace. So the Gemara says, Arba tocho ksivi. Since it could have said toch, but it says tocho, and it says tocho twice in the pasuk, we view it as though the word tocho was written 4 times. Tocho, tocho, and toch. Chadal gufe, one is to teach us that it becomes tamei from the airspace. Chadal xereshava, one is to say that it can transmit, one is to say it can transmit tumah from the airspace. One is to say that it becomes tamei. One is to tell us that the other utensils don't become tamei from the tocho. And what is the 4th one? And the 4th one is tocho will tocho. That if its airspace becomes tamei, but not tocho. Vafilu kli shetef. And that teaches kli shetef is a utensil. Like, what does shituf mean in modern Hebrew? To wash. So a utensil that you wash, like a metal utensil. So v'lo toch tocho. So the case here is, let's say there's a metal utensil in a kli cheres. So inside, let's say there's a kli cheres, and inside you put a metal utensil, and the metal utensil has an opening above this, and there is so even though under those circumstances, what happens is something falls in. Look at Rashi. So let's say that the Rashi says that let's say you have the middle utensil and a food and a tumah falls into the airspace of the outer utensil. then the food in the inner utensil does not become tamei because it's tocho, but not tocho. And even though it's a metal utensil, we're not going to say that it transmits tumah there. Which you might have thought the metal utensil will get tumah by touching it on the outside, but we're saying we're not going to say that. What you call kelim mitame migabon el mitochan ubenegia mikav chomer. So now the Gemara says a different idea. We should say that not all utensils should not become tamei from their outside, only from their inside. Ubenegia, and only by touching, and it should be a kav chomer. Ma klicharis shemetame me'aviro, just like klicharis, which becomes tamei from its airspace. Eino mitama migavo doesn't become tamei from touching it. Kol kelim shem mitama me'aviron. All other utensils that are not mitame from their airspace, Eino din shem mitama migavo. For sure, they should not become tamei from touching them on their outside. Amarkra v'chol kli pasuach asher ein samid pasioav tamehu. So any utensil that's open that's not covered is tamei. Hi who the dichien samid pasioav tamei. Hayesh samid pasioav tahor. This clay utensil is the only one that if there's no cover on it, that it becomes tamei. But if there's a cover on it, it's tahor. Hakol kelim, but all other utensils, bein sheyesh samid pasiolam, bein shein samid pasiolam atamen. All other utensils, whether they have a cover or not, they're going to become tamei from the outside. So now we go to the next Mishnah, and the next Mishnah says tar b'kliyates tamei b'kli matachos. Here it doesn't mean that it's actually tar, but what a utensil is capable of becoming tamei only when it's a finished product. So here it means that a wood utensil is capable of becoming tamei, or a metal utensil is capable of becoming tamei. So tahor b'kliyates, when a wood utensil is not yet capable of becoming tamei because it's still tahor, that will be tamei b'kli matachas. The metal utensil in a similar situation would be capable. Tahor b'kli matachas, but when the metal utensil is tahor, tamei b'kliyates, then the wooden utensil is capable of becoming tamei. So they're opposite. So Tan Rabbanan, golme kliyates tamein. Let's say you have a wooden utensil that's basically, golme means like it's, you ever hear of the golem? You ever hear of the golem? Like the golem was like this mythical figure that the Maral of Prague created. He was short of a, he needed a figure. Then they have a question, can you count him in a minion? It was like the original AI bot that was created. So a golem is like an unfinished creature, like rough around the edges. So here it's like a golem kliyates is a wooden utensil that was made and it's functional, but it wasn't finished. Like they didn't do certain finishing touches on it. So if it would be wooden, then it would be considered like it's a finished product, even though it's missing some of the finishings. Pshutein, but if it's just a straight piece of wood, then we're going to say it's tahor. That's not tamei. But golme kli matachos, but if it will be a metal utensil and it is missing the finishing touches, that's tahorin. Whereas pshutein, tamei, whereas the straight piece of metal are tamei. Nimsa tahor b'kliyates, whatever is tahor by a wood utensil is tamei by kli matachos, is tamei by metal. Tahor b'kli matachos, tamei b'kliyates. And the opposite, whatever is tahor by metal is tamei by kliyates. Ve'elu ein golme kliyates. This is this product, this golme kliyates, this unfinished wood product, which we're saying is capable of contracting tumah. Kol sha'atir lashuf, anything that eventually you're going to smooth it down, or l'shabetz, or you're going to like polish it, or what is it? What was to scrape it down, l'charakov, to put a net over it, la'tiach betunas, to spread out tunas. Tuna is a type of fish. What type of fish does it sound like? Tuna. La'tiach betunas. In all of these cases, mechusar kain, or if it's missing its bottom, or ogen, or if it's missing its lip, or ozen is missing a handle. All these cases, we're going to say that it's still good enough utensil for wood, and it's tamei. But mechusar chatita, but if it's missing the chatita, meaning to say, if he didn't completely carve it out, then it's tahor. Then it's going to be tahor. If you didn't like hollow it out, it's missing its receptacle. So the Gemara says, mechusar chatita, obviously if you didn't hollow it out, pshita, that's a straight piece of wood. Of course it's tahor. And the Gemara says, "L'tzricha dechal kapiza bekava." So, mean to say that you made a receptacle that's appropriate for a kapiza, which is 3 lugin, but with a wood that typically would be something to hold a kav. Means you made a small receptacle, but not what was intended for. So then we're going to say it's not a utensil yet; it's tahor. These are the metal utensils that are not yet finished. Kol sha'atid, rashuf, l'shabetz, l'gar, l'chaker, l'hakish, l'kornis, to bang it out, mechutzer kein, or ogen, or ozen, tahor. If all those cases, if it's missing any of those things, like the scraping it down, or the handles, or hammering it out, basically polishing it, it's tahor. Mechutzer kisoy, but if it's missing just its cover, it's tummy. The Gemara asked the question of why. Why, if it's a golme kuyetz, is it considered a utensil? But if it's a golme kuyematechas, it's not a utensil. Ma'ishna hani, u'ma'ishna hani. What's the difference between these two scenarios? So Rabbi Yochanan Amar, so Rabbi Yochanan says, since the metal one is made for honor, meaning to say it's a decorative piece, so if it's missing the decorative, then it's not going to be considered a utensil. Whereas Rav Nachman Amar hold the main yikarin, since the metal utensil is worth much more money, if it's missing the metal, if it's missing the furnishings, we're going to say it loses its value. My benayo, what's the distinction between them? Ika benayo kui etzem. If you have a bone utensil, the bone utensil is not made for decorative, but it's very expensive, and so therefore, Rav Nachman would say it's not a utensil under if it's missing the finishing. Damar Rav Nachman kui etzem kui matachas damu. V'az Rav Nachman tamei damar Rav Nachman kui etzem kui matachas damu. That a bone utensil is like a metal utensil. And Gemara says, you mean to say that kuyetzim can be mekabel tuma, miklal the kuyetzim mekabel tuma? Gemara says, yes, it can. In the Tanya of Shmuel ben Rav Yochanan Broka, Omer Matamo Omer. What do we do from the fact that the pasuk says v'chol? It says v'chol masei izim that all the parts of the goat can become tameh, and you need to purify. Titchato, you have to purify. V'avi davar abba min ha'izim. So it's to tell us that anything that comes from the goat, from the horns, or from the nails, or from the hooves, is going to be capable of contracting tama. So even the bones, like made from the horns. And how do we know that all the other animals, also their bones, are able of contracting tama? It says anything that comes from it. Why does it say goats? Prato ophos. The bones of a bird cannot contract tuma. Okay, so now up to the next mission. The next mission tells us that a food item, you have to take meiser from it when it is capable of being a food item. So achayev v'shkedim hamarim. So when you're obligated to take meiser from the bitter almonds, pater b'mitzukim, then you're exempt from the sweet almonds. When you're obligated in the sweet almonds, pater b'meirim, then you're b'marim, then you're going to be exempt from the bitter ones. Tana Rabbanan. So what are we talking about here? Shkedim hamarim, the bitter almonds, ketanim, if they're small, chayavin, because when they're small, they're still sweet. When the longer they grow, the more bitter they get. You know what this is like? The opposite of romaine lettuce. Romaine lettuce, because how can you eat it for our maror? It's bitter. So the answer is that right now it's sweet, but if you leave it in, it becomes bitter. So we harvest it before. So here it's the opposite. These almonds, when they're in the ground, when they're small, they're sweet, but so you have to take meiser on them. But when they grow bigger, then you're exempt. Peturin, mitukim. But if you have sweet almonds, then when they are gedolim, when they're big, you're chayavin. Ketan and peturim. But when they're small, you're exempt because they start off bitter. He says, actually, in both cases, the zev is eliftor. It means to say that doesn't make a difference between the sweet almonds and the bitter almonds, that they're both exempt from meiser because when the almonds are small, they're not big enough. And so you don't have to take a mitzer on it. So, so he's saying that when they're both small, they're both exempt because they're not finished fruits. And they respond to him by saying, actually, when they're both bigger, you have to take a tithe on both of them. Meaning to say, even the bitter ones you have to tithe because, as we'll see, you could cook them. So Amar Rabbi Eli, or Rabbi Chanina Mitzipori Kedivri Amar, that when they're both small, you're exempt. The small ones, the sweet ones, because they're still bitter, and the bitter ones because they're not yet a completed fruit. And according to the one that says that when they're both big, you have to take a tithe on it. Gedolim, what are you going to use the bitter almonds for? They're not a food. So here Rabbi Yochanan says, "Oh, the yachol and matkan ayidea or." Since you could sweeten them through the fire, cooking them, you make them sweet. Therefore, they're going to be considered like they are a food item. Okay, we're up to the next Mishnah. Temed. Temed is if you take water and you mix it with the dregs of the grape seeds at the bottom of the barrel. And so therefore it's initially going to be water, but eventually it'll ferment. Now, Meiser Sheni, you could use your Meiser Sheni money, which is the tithe that you have to take your food to Jerusalem to eat. You could use that to purchase food to eat in Jerusalem, but you can't use it to purchase water. So Hatemed, Achlo Hechmetz, before this Temed, the water with the dregs, because before it ferments and becomes like alcohol, Eino Nikach because of Meiser. You can't use your Meiser Sheni money to buy it. Uposel as a mikvah. And it disqualifies the mikvah. What does that mean? It disqualifies the mikvah. So let's see what Rashi says here. Rashi says, and the first wide line of the Rashi, Umayim huskru inyan lipso as a mikvah b'shlosha lugin mayim sheuvim. Im nafu tochen kodem shehumshachu bo arba'im sa. V'yayin eno posel as a mikvah. A mikvah is required to have 40 sa of water that's not drawn. But if once you have 40 sa of water that's drawn, it's a kosher mikvah. But let's say you have 3 lugin of water that was drawn that falls in before you get to 40 sa, then the mikvah is disqualified. But wine wouldn't disqualify it unless it discolors it. So in this case, if you have this water mixed with temed and it falls into the mikvah before it ferments, then we're going to say it's still water and it disqualifies the mikvah. But mishehichmitz, but once it ferments, nikach b'kas of meiser, it could be bought with the meiser sheni money. And it doesn't disqualify the mikvah. Because once it ferments, it's wine, and wine doesn't disqualify with 3 lugin before it gets to 40 sa. Ha'achen va'ashutfin, the 2 brothers, or really, you could, I think they must take out the word. Okay, so brothers and partners, Achim va'ashutfin, Kishachayavim bekolbon. So this is a new law. Petur mi meiser behema. Kishachayavim b'meiser behema. Petur min kolbon. When the brothers and partners, when they're obligated in the kolbon, they're exempt from meiser. They're exempt from meiser behema. When they're obligated in meiser behema, they're exempt from the kolbon. Okay, so these are 2 laws. What are the 2 laws? These are the laws of meiser behema and kolbon. So we'll just take the meiser behema as the 10th animal. You have to bring it to the base of Mikdash and it becomes sacred, every 10th animal. But if you have a partner, then you don't have to do it. Whereas kolbon is that when you give have a good day, Mendy. When you give the half shekel, you have to give a little bit extra called a kolbon in case for some reason the exchange rate is off or there's not enough silver. But if somebody pays the kolbon on behalf of somebody else, then if somebody pays the half shekel on behalf of somebody else, then they don't have to pay the kolbon. So the brothers and the partners, in a circumstance when they're obligated in kolbon, means say when they inherit the estate and they're paying it on their own, so they each have a share, then they're going to be exempt from the meiser because they're partners in it. But when they're obligated in the meiser, because they're not going to be considered partners. They each own their own amount individually. Then they're patur min hakolban because the estate is paying it on their behalf. So, okay, we'll stop here. Pick it up again, Baruch Hashem, tomorrow. This is today's daf. Yasher koach to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.